What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us again for another great video meetup today, sponsored by Trusted Tech Team. As always, I'm your host, Justin Ong. We've got a great show for y'all today. We're going to be talking all about Windows 11. For more on this, we have an amazing panel of experts, both from Trusted Tech Team. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce them. Coming to us first, you've seen him on the show before from Trusted Tech Team. Everyone, please welcome back Mr. Mike Yu. Mike, welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Justin. It's good to see all of you again. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael, like Justin said, and yeah, I'm excited to be here
Very
again
cool.
today.
Awesome, Mike. For those who've not had the pleasure of meeting you before, do you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you do for Trusted Tech?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been working in tech for a little over a decade now. It sounds like a long time when I say it like that, but I started out working in MSPs, dealing with a whole number of different environments, and did a lot of jobs both as like MSP and in-house IT. A few years ago, I started working on Azure stuff and projects and things like that, and I just kind of decided that cloud was where I wanted to focus my efforts. So I joined Trusted Tech Team as a cloud architect. I've been here ever since, and here I am.
All right. Well, thanks for.
I am currently using David's office at the moment.
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. It's great to have you back. Let's welcome your partner in crime for this event, from Trusted Tech, Mr. Robert Bodenhofer. Robert, welcome. How's it going today?
Thank you. Good. Enjoying this California rain that we don't get often.
Very cool.
This is very
Robert,
rainy
do you mind
today.
telling us about yourself and what you do for Trusted Tech?
For sure. I originally come from the IT background. I've been a system administrator for about 10 years, ranging from healthcare to financial institutions. So a lot of history there. I actually joined Trusted Tech Team to kind of help, using my real world experience to provide some of the best support that a CSP can kind of offer. Actually having somebody to help that has done everything that you guys have done. A
Right.
little about me. I like to do some my spare time. I like to do a little bit of 3D printing. I paint, and I also play in a pinball league.
Oh, wow. Very cool. It's great to know. Well, thanks for joining us, Robert. We're excited to have you on as well. Before we go any further, a couple things I did want to cover. If you do have questions for our panel about Windows 11, possibly pinball tips, please get them into the Q&A widget down below. We'll be taking them later on in the show. Also, definitely want to make sure to check out Trusted Tech's provided a couple of handouts for us on both Windows 11 compatibility as well as a health check app from PCs, and definitely give those a look. I wanted to give a special shout out to chat. See a lot of our favorite folks in there. Some folks that we haven't seen in a while. Welcome back to Brian and CA, Shiva RR, and I saw Eagle Mitchell in there as well. A lot of our favorite folks. Excited to have everyone today. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We do ask, though, if you do participate in chat, that you adhere to our community guidelines. We want to make sure that everybody's having a positive and professional time in today's show. And for hanging out with us today, one of y'all is going to be walking away with an Amazon gift card worth five big bills of Amazon gift card. And as always, my only request is that you spend it all on yourself. Don't tell your partner, your kids, your family members, your friends, your coworkers about it. Just drop it on something frivolous, something you would never buy if you didn't have this gift card. Just do it. Don't ask questions. But we'll be announcing the winner of at the end of the show, as well as taking your questions. But for now, let's go ahead and get started into the conversation. Robert, a few years ago, Microsoft said that Microsoft would be the, quote, last version of Windows. And then lo and behold, here we are today talking about Windows 11. Can you talk to us a little bit about, where are we with Windows, and, what are some of the things that we're going to be covering in today's discussion?
For sure. 11, big new number. Honestly, not too many changes that you guys have to worry about. There's definitely some good changes, but nothing that's going to break. I know one of the biggest concerns that they are addressing with Windows 11 is security. And it's a big topic for today. You're hearing the news left and right that, so-and-so is compromised, or, this person is compromised, and it's a little concerning, especially when it's your neighborhood bank. So Microsoft is really, really pushing security, and that's one thing they're doing with Windows 11. That ties in with some of the new hardware requirements that may prevent you from even installing Windows 11 on your existing equipment. Um, so considered a new security baseline, and Microsoft didn't want Windows 11 to be a huge change. Now, I know a lot of you are like, well, this looks nothing like Windows 10. Yes, visually there is some graphical upgrades, but for the most part, what you know as Windows 10 is Windows 11. There's a few changes. The start menu has a different position, which throws a lot of people off. But the control panel is still there. Your good old-fashioned tools, device manager, none of that's changing. Microsoft is obviously definitely pushing towards the cloud, and my coworker Michael is going to touch a little bit on Windows 365 and what that is. So as well as they're trying to make it easier for you guys. So they're consolidating a lot of features. I know there's been that fragmentation of, well, there's the Windows 10 control panel, but then there's also the traditional one, and some tasks can be in one and not in the other, and it's very frustrating. So they're definitely trying to streamline it all, which is why they have to do some of the graphical changes that they did. And I know people don't like that change, but I've been using it as a daily driver, and after you get used to it, it's so much easier. Tasks are a lot quicker. One thing they did, for example, is they consolidated PowerShell and typical just command line all into a single new app that's updated regularly from the Microsoft Store. So you don't have to have your PowerShell window open, as well as all the other little command line tools. They've integrated it all into one easy program. So definitely some good changes happening.
All right, cool. All right, Michael, let's go to you next, right? So, what are some of the new features of Windows 11 that you're pretty excited about? And specifically for the sysadmin crowd, what would you say that we have to look forward to?
Right. So as a sysadmin, I think most other sysadmins would agree with me. When there's a big change like this coming, the first thing I really kind of feel is fear and trepidation, because big changes like these usually kind of disrupt your workflow, or make you change the way you do things. You have to learn new things, and all of that fun stuff that comes with stuff like that. But like Robert said, it's not really like a huge overarching change. It's more like, small little improvements here and there that kind of make the experience a little better, streamlines things, and just kind of improves on UI and UX. But one of the things that I really like is the inclusion of the security app. And this is kind of like a central control panel for these workstations, where you can go and just kind of get like a good overview of the computer, and any security risks that might be present on there. So it makes it a lot easier for sysadmins to go around and check their users' computers if you don't already have a solution like that in place. It's a good central, good easy overview. In addition to that, Microsoft released security baselines that you can set on user workstations. These are fully customizable, but if you don't have the time to really get deep into the weeds with it, they do have some default ones that you can set for your user workstations. So this allows you, and especially like the smaller to mid-sized companies that don't have a robust IT department, to kind of set a standard baseline so that the users aren't just completely vulnerable when they get their new workstations. Microsoft has been pushing pretty heavily into cloud-based and VDI-based workspaces instead of the traditional tower for every user. And so the remote desktop app that you use to remote into the Azure Virtual Desktop is included with Windows. And it also allows you an easier way to access your Windows 365 business and enterprise desktops if you do use those. Power Automate is now a standard feature, and it's kind of replaced the task scheduler. It's really useful for, kind of automating a lot of things that you do on a daily basis on your computer, so you don't have to keep doing it manually. Power Automate does have a lot more parameters and things that you can set than Task Scheduler did, so it gives you a lot more power and control over the tasks that you do automate on your computer. One thing that I'm pretty excited about is the ability to download and use Android apps on your Windows computer. You would download them from the Microsoft Store just like you would any other app, and it'll run alongside your system as if you were using an Android phone. The terminal, like Robert touched on a little bit earlier, is just a very small change, but one I think is highly welcomed. And it just kind of allows you to have one terminal window open instead of one for command prompt, one for PowerShell, one for Azure CLI, so on and so forth. It's just these little changes that make life a little easier for sysadmins. But one of my favorite things about Windows 11 is because it's not such a drastic change. It's not like you're going from XP to 7 or 7 to 10. Kind of forgot about 8 in there, but instead of these big shifts, because they're making these gradual changes, a lot of the things that used to work with Windows 10 still work with Windows 11, and there's nothing that you really have to update or worry about or things like that. So all the apps that work on Windows 10 work on Windows 11. All of the deployments solutions like MDT and Intune and all of that still work the same with Windows 11. So for a lot of the sysadmins out there, there's very little that you have to change in your day-to-day, and there's very little that you have to relearn or kind of start from scratch. So overall, I think this is kind of the future of OS releases, where instead of these every 4 or 5 years they release a new OS, it's going to be small gradual changes like these that will just kind of build on what they already have and make life a little easier.
Cool. Robert, let's go back to you. So now that we have a good understanding of what Windows 11 is, let's dig in on some more practical information. So what can you tell us about what you guys are seeing for a typical adoption timeline, and what would you say are the key considerations folks should be thinking about?
Yeah. So touching back kind of on, how Mike was saying that, I thought Windows 10 was supposed to be the last OS. Well, why is there 11? And it comes down to really, a lot of Microsoft has a lot of legacy components to Windows. And to be honest, they're rather tired of supporting it. We all know the holiday season's coming up, and we're all going to have extended family that's, can you look at my 10-year-old computer that has Windows 10? And you're like, this never should have had it. And Microsoft agrees. So they're creating Windows 11 as a new baseline. So that's why the new hardware requirements exist. We're going to kind of touch why those specific hardware requirements do happen. But Windows 10 and Windows 11 are very similar. But Microsoft wants a more stable experience that some people don't get on Windows 10. And the only way to really do that is to create a new version. Because could you imagine, oh, cool, there's a new update out for my existing Windows 10. Oh, half of my computers can't support it. And now you have half of your workplace that can support some weird version of Windows 10, and the other half is the opposite. So that creates a giant fragmentation that Microsoft doesn't want. So that's why they're like, well, let's just create a new minimum. We're starting with 11 moving forward. So they're trying to make a balance between, the OS working with every piece of hardware in existence, computers that still have floppy drives, versus, a modern, newer devices like, the Surface. So you can kind of choose between stability and compatibility. And Microsoft definitely doesn't want people to have issues with compatibility on, software. So they're kind of bumping up the hardware requirement. Specifically, you're going to notice that the processor requirements have changed quite dramatically. Some of you might have a computer that is extremely powerful, but it's just slightly too old. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why would Microsoft do that? We'll touch on it in a little bit, but the truth comes down to supporting those drivers and those softwares. They notice that it does not create a very good experience, and we're going to some of the stats why. You'll notice in the sidebar, we did link to a specific document that will give some details, but basically one of the newest requirements for Windows 11 is the processor. Specifically, you're going to notice that Intel 8th gen and newer is going to work. Same with some of the newer AMDs. Anything older will not work. And I know some of you are like, well, I thought you said Windows 10 is very close. Yes, it will technically work. There are some workarounds to get it to install, but Microsoft's stance is we're not going to support it. We don't even know if we're going to give you updates. Basically, don't attempt it or you're on your own. And the last thing you want, having a giant enterprise is having a bunch of devices that are not getting updates properly, are crashing constantly, basically non-recommended hardware. So there's that extensive list on the sidebar that will show you what devices are compatible and not. Specifically, they noticed a lot of you have probably heard of the Windows Insider program, which is Microsoft's equivalent of beta testing for end users. And they noticed that basically devices that do meet the requirement have a 99.8% crash-free experience, which is pretty impressive given that a lot of us have for sure seen blue screens and stuff. They did notice that if they don't meet the minimum system requirements, they had a 52% chance more of crashing. And Microsoft doesn't want that. They want people to be like, Windows 11, stable, which is what they've been struggling with in the past. There's also the new hardware requirement for the TPM. Microsoft is really pushing for the security aspect as well. I think they had a study that showed that 20% of data leaks actually been from physical hardware leaks, whether it be, your CEO leaves his computer in his car and it gets broken into. That's, kind of a disaster waiting to happen unless you've set up BitLocker or something like that, which you used to have to set up manually, but now Windows by default will automatically encrypt new drives, which is kind of a bonus. So that's why there's that hardware TPM requirement, as well as, it provides the ability for the OS to do some sandboxing and other advanced features that Microsoft is kind of very much pushing for. So that's kind of why the big difference of Windows 10 versus Windows 11. It provides a new start, a new beginning where Microsoft can kind of forget the legacy side. And I know that definitely isn't going to work for everyone, which is why Windows 10 is still supported for a long while. They're going to continue putting out updates. You are not forced to upgrade unless there's specific features that you absolutely need. So hopefully that answers a lot of questions that you guys might have.
Okay. So what about for sysadmins? So once you've deployed it, does anything change? What are some of the things that might come into play once we've been rolling it out?
That's a really good question. So Microsoft has kind of changed their stance on rolling out OS upgrades. Back in the days of Windows 7, if you're going to upgrade, you're reformatting that entire computer and starting from scratch. Microsoft has definitely made it a lot easier, including their recommended approaches. They're actually now pushing it out through Windows Update. And that's why there's a lot of that. Going back to the hardware compatibility, is there are too many variables for older hardware that they want this to be a seamless experience. They want people to think of upgrading as now something they can look forward to instead of, is my computer going to crash? Am I going to lose all my information? That also goes back to, it is possible that, updating isn't for you. So your upgrade path or deployment path may be actually new hardware. A lot of companies already have a 3 to 5 year, hardware cycle. So integrating that into your hardware cycle will also make it a lot easier. So also at the same time, it's perfectly fine not to upgrade. So yeah, you have some options. Via Windows Update is going to be the recommended option. Microsoft also released a nifty little tool that you can download called the PC Health Check app. It's also linked in our sidebar. What this does is it will check your hardware, make sure that you have the TPM, that you have a supported CPU, as well as it checks your software. There's a lot of antivirus programs that maybe weren't designed very well or are extremely out of date, and that causes a lot of issues with some of the newer security features or sandboxing. So it will let you know, hey, this sketchy antivirus program that this user downloaded and you didn't realize is not compatible with Windows 11. So it will help check, recommendation would be check a few of your different, hardware platforms that you currently have out and see, make sure that it's compatible before you start planning your upgrade process. There's also the traditional option of imaging, which for hardware that I would say is more than 2 years old would be the recommended approach. It gives you a new start, a brand new experience, less clutter to bring over. That's also Microsoft's recommendation. But if you do have a newer device, Windows Update is pretty seamless about rolling it out. Since it is, again, even though new requirements, it's still very similar to Windows 10. So luckily, the upgrade experience is not that different. So, along with deployment, you have to wonder, how are my users going to react to this? There's more than just the technical requirements. There's, well, this looks completely different. Yes, so the graphical interface is obviously a little bit different. There's going to be some resistance. We've already seen some questions. Well, I have my taskbar on the side, and right now Windows 11 doesn't support that. What am I supposed to do? For the most part, Windows 11 is a little more of a reskin than a complete overhaul. There's still the traditional Windows elements. Some of them look a lot nicer. There's newer apps like Michael mentioned, such as the new Windows Terminal app. But a lot of the traditional stuff is still there. It just looks a lot nicer, and honestly, it performs a lot better. So just to recap, upgrading is definitely a path, but also keep in mind that you may be better off including manpower to consider deploying Windows 11 along with your hardware refresh.
All right. Next question. So, in terms of why organizations would want to move to Windows 11, what are the kind of selling points for the management? And if you are a 365 customer, are there advantages that are built in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for any company where security plays a big role, which should be every company that exists right now, having Windows 11's machines will just kind of ensure that, uh, there's the weakest part of any security plan or policy is going to be the users. That's just kind of an unavoidable fact. Having these security baselines that come with the Windows 11 machines does a pretty decent job of kind of upping that bar a little bit. And preventing a lot of these, smaller attacks from happening. Nothing is going to replace training your users to recognize attacks and, be their own best security. But small steps in the right direction, I think, do make a big difference over the long run. So you have the baseline to kind of, set the default policy. Defender is also included now, and honestly, Windows Defender is one of the best AVs that I've used. Microsoft has a lot of experience fighting viruses because they're on the receiving end of like over 90% of all hacks because they're the market leaders. So over the years, they've gotten really good. And Windows Defender, I think, is honestly one of the best solutions out there, including paid ones. And then you also have Windows Hello, which is becoming more prominent. It's better for logins and things like that, especially in shared environments. So just a lot of small security things that will just, little by little raise your baseline security. The remote desktop option also integrates really well with the Azure offerings, the Azure Virtual Desktop, as well as the Windows 365 VDI experiences that you can also get from Microsoft now. And it's also much easier to multitask. And Windows 11 has a cool feature that allows you to create separate desktops, right? So instead of just having one desktop where all of your, work and leisure things reside together, you can separate them out. So, when you need to do work, you can pull up your work desktop so you're not, tempted by Steam and Battle.net and what have you. Whereas, when you're in leisure mode, you can pull up your leisure desktop and not be bothered by any of your work stuff. And you can create multiple of these, and you can style them and theme them however you want. And it's just a nice way for you to, multitask a little more efficiently. So whenever there's a OS upgrade, I think the three things that really, come into play is security, stability, and compatibility. Those are, I think, the three things that most people worry about whenever something like this happens. And security is definitely the main focus of Windows 11. But stability and compatibility have also been big factors as well. And I think this is the first OS release from Microsoft that in my memory, that compatibility is almost a non-issue. Everything that I've tested so far on the Windows 11 testbed has just seemed to work without any sort of tweaks. You don't have to run it in compatibility mode. You don't have to add lines of code to the launcher or anything like that. It just kind of works the same as it used to. So compatibility is big here, and I think the only real limiting factor to Windows 11 at the current moment is the hardware requirement. So as Robert was saying, you don't really need to upgrade. If Windows 10 is working fine for your organization, keep using Windows 10. But when you do a hardware refresh and you're buying new computers, give Windows 11 a try. I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised by the little improvements and the UI upgrades and things like that. So there is a time and a place for both Windows 10 and 11. And all I can say is give it a try, and I think you will like what you see.
Cool. All right. And Robert, anything from you? What do you feel like folks ought to keep an eye out on the horizon?
For sure. So there's a few things. One thing one of the things that Windows 11 has definitely changed is the way that drivers are handled. I know a lot of us are very dealing with drivers is a very tedious process. You've got multiple hardware manufacturers, multiple versions of the same hardware. Somehow it's the exact same model, but yet this one has a different, mouse driver. And that's a headache to try to manage all of that. And some of the manufacturers, Dell, for example, has Dell Command Update that, helps manage all of that. But again, it's still something you have to manage. One thing that Windows 11 has been working on, specifically again tying back to the hardware requirements, is Microsoft has been really working with Intel, AMD, hardware manufacturers such as Dell, HP, and they're like, hey, we need to fix this constant issue. This is not very user friendly. Nobody has to update their drivers on their iPhone or their Android device. That's just kind of all handled. And so one thing they've done is they've separated the driver from a lot of the software. So like if you have a video driver, you're going to notice that you can install the Intel graphics driver and it's not going to install the control panel. Sometimes it may, sometimes it won't, depending on how you install it. But that is now separated, and that creates a lot more stability. Because okay, so this software crashed, but the driver shouldn't crash. And it lets them update independently. Intel can push an update for their control panel, and yet the driver can stay the same. And a lot of it utilizes Windows Update. You'll notice that on a lot of Windows 11 devices, you can immediately install it, and there's no drivers to install anymore. Windows Update has already downloaded the latest version of all of it because they have worked with those hardware manufacturers to make sure that the latest versions are published to Windows Update. Some of you are definitely thinking, oh, this is going to be a headache for if I have, a Windows Update server. Microsoft is also moving away from that model of there's now a lot of group policies, a lot of tools you can use to manage native Windows Update without having to run your own server. So for example, you can still have your Windows Update server, but yet all the driver updates can still come directly from Microsoft. That also ties back into security. You've got the latest, you don't have to worry. Some hardware manufacturers even push out BIOS updates via Windows Update, which is pretty impressive. So that also ties back into that reliability. There's very little blue screen. Any other hardware crashes is extremely rare unless you have a hardware issue. So you're going to see a huge quality of life improvement, especially when you're deploying. You don't have to worry about managing any of that anymore. Basically, that's why the hardware requirements are so strict, and you're really going to enjoy it. Yes, there's a transition period, but once your whole office is on Windows 11, you get a lot more free time. So you can use that to watch YouTube. One more little catch. It hasn't gotten too much news, but I know a lot of you are probably from healthcare industries or finance industries, and management is a little slow to get things moving. Some of you may have to use Internet Explorer, and one thing that's different is it is gone. It is dead. It does not exist anymore, which a lot of you, I'm sure, are jumping for joy. But no need to fear. So Edge also has an IE mode where it emulates Internet Explorer. So for specific websites that you may have internally, you're still able to use that to make sure that you're able to access all those resources. And obviously going into the future, what's in the horizon, there's a lot of work, with Linux, for example. You're able to now install a complete OS within Windows to help do any kind of coding, other kind of development features. Mike has mentioned Android apps. That's a huge thing. A lot of people like that interface where, oh, I have this app on my phone, now I can have it on my computer, and it's the same experience. So it unifies that a little bit, as well as opens up some opportunities that weren't there before.
Cool. All right. Well, we got a ton of questions coming in, so let's go ahead and get started into them. Let's start with Shiva RR, who asks, have you tried installing Windows 11 on a non-compatible PC, and what problems, if any, arose as a result? Michael or Robert, anything? And you guys have any experience with that?
Yeah. So one, they have some hardware blocks, so they'll actually prevent you from installing. They're going to say, hey, this isn't compatible, and they'll tell you why. It depends on how you install it, via Windows Update, if you try to do it that way, or if you try to download the update tool, or if you try a fresh install. There's definitely those hardware blocks. Now, there are workarounds But my recommendation is don't bother. You're going to run into more trouble than it's worth. You know, if your hardware is that old, stay on Windows 10. I know it's traditionally we always want the latest and greatest, um, but you're not going to get the experience you want.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get a question from Naresh. So, what is the difference between Windows 11 Home and Windows 11 Pro?
Gotcha. So, uh, because Windows 11 isn't kind of like a new beast, the differences between the Home and Pro versions of Windows 11 is pretty much symmetrical to the difference between Windows 10 Home and Windows 10 Pro. And really, the biggest thing for companies is Windows 10 or Windows 11 Home can't join a domain, so it's not really meant to be used in a work environment. If you only have like a couple of people in a small office and you don't have a domain or anything like that, it's not too big a deal. But for any mid to large size businesses, you absolutely want to go with the Pro version minimum in a work environment. Um, so other than that, there's as far as like core functionality goes, there's not a whole lot besides the domain join. But I can't think of any situation where you want to use Home in a business setting.
Let's take a question. This is a good question. This is from either BBB Brandon or possibly Brandon. Have they announced the end of life for Windows 10 yet?
They have not.
Nope.
I have a feeling that Windows 10 is not going to be end of life for at least like 3-4 years minimum. Just kind of a gut feeling, but Windows 11 isn't really meant to fully replace Windows 10 like you know how 7 replaced XP or 10 replaced 7. It's meant to be more like if Windows 11 fits your situation and you have the hardware to do it, then you should do it. But Windows 10 is not going away anywhere soon. It's still a very good operating system, and you know there's still companies out there that use 7 and XP, and so it really depends a lot on your scenario. But no, both have their time and place.
All right. Another good question. This one comes from Spice404. I understand Microsoft has strict compatibility standards due to security reasons, but as a nonprofit, it is extremely difficult to justify throwing away rather new desktops to our organization. We have already deployed Windows 10 with a bypass to their security standards of our Intel processors to test in our environment. Do you think they will make it impossible to receive updates in the future on these machines?
So off the record, I would say they're probably going to continue giving updates. On the record, it's not supported, and at any time they can remove the ability for that update. They have those hardware requirements not because it's a cash grab, but mainly because they want to make sure you have a good experience. And if you kind of go around that blockade, it's you're in the wild, wild west and expect for the unpredictable.
Um, and then circling back to the end of life, it looks like people have found that October 14th, 2025 was announced.
So the reason I didn't say that was the end of life is because Microsoft also said Windows 10 was the last version of Windows, and 4 years, 3 years away is a long time, and I really have a gut feeling that they're going to extend that past 2025 because I don't think 3 years from this point with the strict hardware requirements. Um, I don't think everyone's going to be off Windows 10 by that time, not even close. And I don't think Microsoft is going to want to stop supporting Windows 10 either.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. This is a question from Ben Wati. Is Windows 11 going to be a quote skip version like Vista before the next real functional version of Windows comes out that we should use for enterprise? That's some Vista slander right there. I don't know what you guys.
I mean, kind of well deserved. Vista wasn't exactly the greatest OS, and for good reason. And yeah, there does seem to be that pattern where 7 was great, skip Vista. Sorry, XP was great, skip Vista. 7 was great, skip 8, and go to 10. But I don't think it's going to be like that anymore because it's not going to be big releases, right? Like we talked about, it's going to be more gradual kind of. These are more patches than like expansion packs, if you want to look at it that way. So I don't think it's going to be a skip version because I don't think it's going to be following the same formula as they have for the past couple of decades. I think it's just going to be patch after patch after patch, small improvements here and there. So I don't think it's going to be a skip version.
Robert, Nini, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. It's definitely, again, it's very similar to Windows 10, so it's not like a lot has changed. It's more of, I would almost consider this like Windows 10 Service Pack with some graphical changes, but they definitely want to make sure that that new baseline is set. There's, like Mike said, there's not a lot of compatibility issues with existing software. It's not like you're going to have driver issues, like with Vista. I would definitely say, I know a lot of companies are like, okay, well, we're going to wait 1 to 2 years. My personal recommendation is if you're getting new hardware and it supports it, go with it because you're going to save yourself a lot of time and effort.
All right. Let's take another question. Oh, this is from Narazola. Do you use Windows Defender or should you pay for an antivirus?
I have never used a paid AV my entire life. I have used Microsoft's AV ever since it came out in Windows 7. I have never been hacked, never been attacked. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, again, your security is only as strong as you are. If you don't visit any shady websites, don't just install things without thinking about it, then the chances of you getting hacked are very, very low, no matter what AV you have. And AV can only do so much, right? Like, if you click on a suspicious link and your AV tells you, hey, this looks kind of weird, maybe don't do it. It always gives you the option to do it anyway because you own the computer and you can do whatever you want because you're an adult. So AV is a great first line of defense, but it won't stop an attack if you don't know what you're doing. But as far as comparing AVs goes, like I've had computers that had paid AVs like McAfee and Norton, and pretty much every AV there is free and paid. And in my experience, none of them have performed as well as Windows Defender.
Let's get another question. This one's from Hooks STJ. They want to know about rolling out images on new hardware with Windows 11. Can admins still use WDS?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
There's a few changes.
All the same. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
There's a few changes. Oh, sorry. There's a few changes. One specifically is you need to have your image already completely built. So I know WDS traditionally lets you have multiple images and you can kind of select from there which one you want to deploy. Microsoft wants you to have that already complete. So you can definitely still use it. And they open up a lot more avenues to also push images and stuff. You've got, combination of autopilot and Intune and endpoint management as well.
Okay, cool. Question from IT analyst guy, and this is a good one. Do you recommend sysadmins be on Windows Insider to see what's up and what's up and coming, or stay on the same release as the end users, or both? Have two machines.
The best answer obviously would be to have both. It's always good to have like a dev or test environment where you can, try out the new things that are coming out so that when it does hit commercial release, you at least have some prior knowledge. I think the Windows Insider program is fantastic. If you have the capacity to, have a test workstation and run all of the new things that Microsoft is coming out with, it's only going to help you. Now, not everything in the Windows Insider is going to stay the same till release. But a lot of them are, and I can't think of a single reason other than time and resource wise where you shouldn't have a test bed for both environments. You always want to be using the same thing as your users so you know exactly what they're going through. But getting ready for upcoming changes is always a good thing.
Cool. All right, let's get another question from Brandon. Will a new server OS be deployed to match the computer OS? Should we be expecting a new Windows Server operating system that will match up with Windows 11, or are they wholly separate?
Yep. So they've already released it 2022.
All right. Pretty easy. Let's take another question Man, lots of people wanting to know about moving the taskbar to the left or the right. What's
It's
the
a
thinking
pretty tough
behind
topic.
that? And will that be? Like, I was like, whatever. Well, if we get to that, we'll have time. Just like people keep asking it, so let's go ahead and address
Yeah.
it. Who wants to talk about moving the taskbar?
This is actually one of the more common things I've heard about Windows 11 is the taskbar has been customizable for every version of Windows up until now, so it kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense that they're locking it to that specific position. Um, I There are like tweaks and third-party ways that you can kind of move it, but I can't. I want to say that Microsoft will give you that ability in the future natively, but I don't know why it's not there now. It seems like a pretty basic thing to have, but as of right now, we we just don't know. But I am right there with you guys.
All right, let's see. Let's get a question. This one from Brandon Klein. I think it's an interesting one. Is there an automatic cleanup process for the leftovers Windows.old folders when upgrading? Because this could cause a lot of work for IT administrators when you're cleaning up several workstations at once.
Yep. So they're actually a lot more strict on it now. I believe you have less than 30 days to actually revert back to Windows 10 if you do upgrade, and it does automatically clean up that folder, unless, of course, there's a situation where something's different about it. But for the most part, it will automatically remove that folder very rapidly.
All right, very cool. Another question from Ben Watt. What changes can we expect to drivers from Windows 10 to Windows 11?
So for the
So I
most
think
part,
that
you can get this one.
okay. uh, there's going to be very little changes in terms of drivers. As far as I've experienced, I haven't had any issues installing drivers, and I can't think of a situation where that's been an issue in my test environment so far. Because it's really kind of the same engine under the hood, I don't think there's going to be any differences whatsoever. This could change in the coming months when new things are pushed out, but as of the current moment, everything I've installed on it has worked so far.
All right, very cool. Another one from Brandon. Will there be compatibility issues with Windows 11 and previous Office versions?
Only if you're going back to like 2003. I haven't tried 2003 yet, but 2007 installed fine for me, and all of the O365 versions are absolutely compatible with no issues whatsoever. Um, yeah, as long as you're 2007 or above, I haven't experienced any issues.
Okay, cool. Question from Dragon's Rule. Will the free Defender link into a console of some sort if you don't have 365 licensing?
Yeah, it'll go to the security app, the inbuilt security app, like the central console for the security overview of the computer. That's where you kind of manage both the Windows AV, the baselines, and things like that. So, yes, short answer, yes.
All right, very cool. And we'll take one last question from. We'll take a couple questions. One from AI. It seems that Windows 11 has made it hard to set Chrome as the default browser. Classic Windows move. We have a number of websites that require the use of Chrome. Is there a simple way of changing the default browser setting?
So that's been definitely a struggle for a lot of people. As some of you noticed, you have to change the link for per file type, per link type, and even Microsoft has hard coded some of their own OS links to only open up in Edge. They're really pushing it. No comment as to why, but I do believe they actually have announced that they are going to make it a little bit easier to swap back into the old traditional way of where you can select an app versus a protocol. I believe that's
Okay,
currently actually in the insider ring.
awesome. And then a question from Sublime DYL. Yes, will it kill my gaming rig to upgrade to 11 from 10?
uh, Not from what I've seen so far. No, as long as your hardware is compatible, you most likely won't notice any difference aside from the UI changes on the desktop. But as far as gaming goes, no, no issues I've seen whatsoever so far.
Okay. Cool.
I actually upgraded my gaming rig, and I actually got a little bit better performance. It's able to utilize your graphics processor a lot better There's a few ways it can directly interact with it now. Again, going back to those hardware requirements, definitely requires, I believe, a computer within the last 2 years.
Cool. And then
It won't
this is
make
a
any better
question.
games, but it won't crash them.
I'm still terrible.
Yeah, and Sean Eckhart in chat, and it's a classic question: will it play Crysis? And it's actually the first time this question is actually accurate and relevant to the topic. So,
you know what? I might just go test that tonight.
Play it today, research business purposes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'll do it
All right,
work.
guys.
I'll
Well,
do
any final thoughts or advice that you guys have for people? I wanted to make sure that we had time to do that. Mike, we'll start with you. Any final takeaways that you have for the crowd today?
Change is scary, and any kind of change is kind of like a road bump, right? And I think it's kind of natural to not want to have the change come and do all that. But Windows 11, I think, really is. There's a lot of issues. There's always issues when OSs first come out, but I think this is definitely a move in the right direction, and I think that it is definitely worth a try. If you have the ability to set up a test computer with the right hardware and get to play around with it a bit, I think it is very beneficial. And I think you'll find some things that you'll really like about the new changes. There's probably going to be some things you don't like, but give it a good try. You might be surprised at how much you like it.
All right, very cool. And Robert, any final takeaways from you?
Yeah, I personally use it. There's definitely a little bit of a learning curve, where things are. Things look a little bit different, but once you get used to it, it's honestly a lot snappier. Surprisingly, I'm used to, yeah, don't touch a new OS for a few months, if not to a few years, but I've been using it as a daily driver and I honestly like it. It definitely seems to be brought up to date compared to, Mac OS and other non-desktop operating systems, Android. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like these fancy graphical changes, but it does help. It's a lot more intuitive. The settings app is a lot better. The things just seem to be a little more seamless, as well as, I don't know, a lot of you, but I have a very big high DPI screen, which Windows has traditionally struggled with, and things look so much better. I mean, I have a monitor that's like, I think like 50 inches wide, and even just the default wallpaper just works perfectly. So it definitely seems like it's a lot more polished, and I don't think it's a skip version. I think it's a don't jump on it. If you've got a lot of older hardware, you're gonna do more harm than good. But if you've got newer hardware, do it. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time and effort, and you're gonna thank yourself in a few years.
All right. Well, there you have it. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with us today and asking all those great questions. It's now time to announce the winner of our prize. So, the winner of our 5 Benjamin Amazon gift card is going to go to Joe Jarvis. Congratulations, Joe. You are the winner of our prize. Please send Ophelia a private message and let her know where you'd like that mail to. And thanks again for hanging out with us. Big thank you to Robert and Mike. Had a great time hanging out with y'all. Hope we get a chance to do this again soon. Big thank you as well to Trusted Tech Team, as always, for sponsoring today's event. We hope to see you guys around in upcoming events. Please click on that orange button below to see what else we've got coming up planned. But until next time, y'all, please stay safe, keep it spicy, happy holidays, and we'll see y'all back here in the new year. Thanks again, everybody.